they said all of them because they set the first one, and they've got us down to virtual zero, supporting Bush and then supporting Obama. And it is a problem. I mean, it's wonderful right now. You can buy a house for a whole lot less, and now's the time to buy it because it's not going to go down lower. You know, if you can, it's the time to get a loan. We're in like post World War II, 3% loans. I just got
what the side effect of all this is the de-dollarization of the world economy. The Chinese are trying to push everything into their standard and move away from the dollar.
They're trying to get rid of the petrodollar deal here. It has started to fall apart. In 1992, by the way, what's his name? I started to say Barack Obama. Saddam Hussein. He was the first one that broke the rule. He was one of our CIA asset for 30 years, and then he broke the rule. He started accepting payment for his oil in something other than American dollars. So he got his hand slapped in 1992, but they kept him around for this next war in 2003 when they finally took him down. You've got the BRIC nations that are wanting to, suggesting that. So we all hear these things about, well, we're going to go towards a world currency. Right now, we are the world reserve currency. We have been since World War II. Biggest, strongest economy, the most stable dollar, and so on. We are still. But there are nations that are wanting to get away from the. Right now, we have been deficit spending on the backs of our enemies, on everybody in the world, spending like drunken sailors here in America because of this petrodollar deal. The inflation part of it is because there's so much money out there that when we spend a bunch of money with our profligate spending, it's not causing the kind of inflation that it would in any other country of the world. The other thing is that we still have the strongest economic production and so on in the world. Okay, so first I just wanted to talk about the Federal Reserve System. It is a problem. It is unconstitutional. It is money that's not backed by gold and silver, as the Constitution requires. It is fiat money, as the Constitution does not allow either the national government or the state governments to do it. Richard?
Have you heard anything, I mean, since interest rates are basically zero, have you heard anything about banks wanting to charge interest on demand deposits, like on your savings?
Oh, yeah, that and the bail-ins. The idea that if the banks start to fail, that they can take money out of your accounts and so on. Scary. If I had any money, I'd be, well, whatever money I have is in silver, not gold and silver. Silver's the poor man's gold. Our Federal Reserve System, it is unconstitutional. We have unconstitutional money, and I guess the bottom line, until we get to the next thing here, is that I want to suggest this is what's going on in the world. The families that own the central banks have the money so that they're able to have tremendous power owning and controlling most of the media of the world, have tremendous power over politicians because the politicians have to go along with the media, or some people are just sold out, I'm sure, but most people are, most politicians, they're in there for their own power and gain, and you just don't argue about the Federal Reserve. I mean, you don't do anything about getting rid of them or even auditing. It's just the craziest thing in the world. It's a slam dunk. There shouldn't be any question about it. We certainly ought to audit the Federal Reserve, and yet we can't even get them to do a full audit of this central bank that's owned by foreign families, for the most part.
And doesn't Congress appoint the Fed chairman, and they can't put anybody in there that can control it?
According to the Constitution and according to law, the president nominates. We say he appoints the Federal Reserve Chairman, but I'm just telling you that the reality of it is that presidents are not at a high enough pay level to appoint, to really choose. When a new president comes in, he gets a whole new cabinet, and he puts in, for the most part, the high level people, plum jobs that we call them. But he doesn't do that with the Federal Reserve Chairman. That Federal Reserve Chairman goes from one to the other. Greenspan was, I think he was there under Greenspan. Bernanke, Ben Bernanke, I think he was there under at least partly under Clinton. He was there under Bush. He was under Barack Obama until just recently.
Have to approve it.
Oh yeah, any high federal officials, Constitution, the U.S. Senate's got to have 2/3 approval. But the point is that the president doesn't really get to choose them. It's pretty clear. Janet Yellen, who in the world would choose Janet Yellen? But she's the new Federal Reserve Chair for the last year or two, however long she's been in. I'm just suggesting to you that presidents don't choose them. They change Federal Reserve Chair when they're told to by the families that own the central banks of the world. They choose. They're not going to let presidents choose, you know. And the Federal Reserve, as we found out with this peak audit, they just do whatever they darn well please. We have given them complete control of our economy. They set the interest rate, they set the value of gold and silver and so on. They create whatever money that they want. I'm going to switch from this, just for the sake of time, to our foreign policy, to our war policy. From 1776 until World War II, we obeyed the Constitution, and we only had constitutionally declared wars. The Constitution requires that the President does not have the power to declare war. It's only the Congress. And the way Congress declares a law is a war, is it would pass a law. So when Pearl Harbor was attacked, President FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, immediately went to Congress and said, I need a declaration of war. They debated it for a short time, and they passed an identical bill in the House and the Senate. That's the way you make a law. They're the lawmakers. Declaring war is a law. And so we had declared wars from 1770, the War of 1812, the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, were all legally declared wars by Congress. Since then, I just mentioned in passing that when I put 1946 because we signed the UN, the war went from to 1945, but we signed the UN Charter in 1946, wherein we said, among other things, that we will never go to war without the authorization of the United Nations. Now, I'm not saying that we've done that. I'm just suggesting that that's a very interesting thing. Since then, we have never had a declared war. We've had the Korean conflict, and we've had Vietnam, and we had 1992. We had Desert Storm, and then but something happened when we had 9/11 here. Now we've continued. So from World War II until 9/11, at least, we have undeclared wars. Now I'm not saying that these wars are good or bad, undeclared wars. I'm just saying that they are illegal. They're unconstitutional because they weren't declared as the supreme law of the land requires. My dad was in World War II, but you know, whether you're for or against the Korean War, the Vietnam War, or that, I'm not arguing about the goodness or the badness of the wars. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that they were not declared legally. They're undeclared wars. We're not obeying the Constitution. And then something happened with 9/11. With 9/11, we started with offensive wars. For the first time ever, offensive. These were all declared and defensive only. We don't believe in America in going to war against someone we're threatened. And then we had undeclared wars, but we continued with defensive wars. All of these were arguably defensive. Our allies that we had treaties with were attacked, and we're defending our allies. Here they attacked. He started Kuwait. Remember all the burning oil derricks and so on. We're defending our allies. But now we started with offensive wars. How did that come about? And here's how it came about. In 1997, there was a think tank created. A think tank which was created by cronies from the George H.W. Bush, the Daddy Bush administration, that created this think tank that was called the Project for a New American Century, or the PNAC. And they were charged with coming up with a foreign policy for the George W. Bush administration should he be elected in 2001. I'm going to write this, but should he be elected in November of 2001. That's when the election was, right? 2000, November of 2000. Well, he was elected in 2000. And took office in January. But so should he be elected in November of 2000, right?
Yeah.
And that's their deal, to come up with a foreign policy, especially a war policy. And they issued their report. It was called the PNAC report. And in fact, well, actually it was the PNAC report, but they also called, the name of it, they called it Rebuilding America's Defenses. Rebuilding America's Defenses. That sounds pretty good. We believe in peace through strength. So on, rebuild America's defenses. We're tired of going downhill and so on. So that sounded pretty good. And this came out, they came out with a report in September of 2000. That's 2 months before George W. Bush was elected, and it was a full year before 9/11, 9/11/2001. And what they said in this, and I'm just using, this was a 90-page report, and you can go back and read it for yourself. It is, as Sean Hannity would say, breathtaking to read it, because these are all their phrases. They said America has the right, we're in the right position. We have the correct political position and freedom and all that kind of stuff, and we have the military might. And so they said we have the right and the responsibility to go around the world in the name of Pax Americana. That somebody should have jumped up and said, wait, don't use that term. How many of you heard of Pax Romana? What was Pax Romana? Do you
The
recall?
end of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, Pax, the peace of Rome, and
400 years.
and the Roman Empire. They used this excuse, this doctrine of Pax Romana. They said we have the right, we're in the right position. Christianity was what they were saying, and we have the military might, and therefore we have the right and the responsibility to go around the world and enforce Christianity by the sword. It was just an excuse for colonialism, taking over other countries. I mean, take over the world and so on. And they call that Pax Romana. It's one of the dark times of history. And so when they use this term Pax Americana, someone should have said, hey, even if this is a wonderful thing you're doing, don't use Pax Americana. It sounds too much like Pax Romana, where they were going to enforce Christianity by the sword. And what they said is we need to go around the world enforcing democracy by the sword. We have the correct political thing here, and so we're going to. And so Bush said, we're going to export democracy. We're going to export the U.S. Constitution, he said many times. They said, with preemptive offensive wars. In other words, we won't wait until we're threatened by someone. We will use preemptive wars against people. We'll make a judgment as to which people we want to make sure that we maintain military. They said America has the responsibility to the rest of the world, because we're in the right position. We're the righteous ones. Okay, I'm overdoing it, but these are their words. We need to maintain military superiority to make sure that freedom prospers in the world, and that the bad guys don't. So we will make decisions as to who we will attack. In the name of Pax Americana, with preemptive wars, to keep them from getting strong enough to challenge, these are their exact words, to keep them from getting strong enough to challenge us militarily, to keep the bad guys from having nuclear weapons, and to carry about regime change. We attack them, we bring about regime change, put in new leadership in there. Well, some people said, well, that sounds like colonialism. Sounds like America's going to attack these other countries. We have not done so. We have attacked other countries, Iraq and Afghanistan and so on, with these offensive preemptive wars. We've threatened Iran, but we don't take over them and add to the American. What we have done is, with a regime change, we have instituted United Nations friendly, world government friendly leaders in these other countries.
Where?
Pardon me?
Where?
In Iraq and in Afghanistan, where we're fighting now.
Oh, it's gotten us a long way down the road.
Yeah, well, it's gone slower than they might have hoped, but
Well, this is mainly promoting the UN more than American
that is promoting
constitutional
it is,
republic.
The UN and
We are not a
globalism and so on.
democracy.
But the point
The
is that we're
UN
talking about offensive preemptive wars here. And by the way, they said in this 90-page report, they said starting in, does anyone know where they said starting in? They said starting in Iraq. This was a full year before 9/11, and Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. We all know that. 15 of the 19 bad guys.
Is that part of the New World Order?
United Nations
That's what they
friendly.
called it.
Pardon me?
Called it the New World Order.
Well, Daddy Bush used that term over 250 times in speeches. And yes, the Bushes have always been globalists. And this is a globalist thing. I believe that. It certainly is turning out that way. But I wanted to point out that they said beginning in Iraq. What they said was Iraq is an obvious one where we might start. Well, why would we start in Iraq? We hadn't had 9/11 yet here. We've had Germany as the basis for our military base there for 50, 60 years. We've had South Korea as the basis over there. The idea was that we would have a base here. President Bush said, we'll go in there and we'll be in and out. I don't know if you remember, but we're doing this daily on the radio, and he said, we'll be in and out in a matter of weeks, and then we'll be in and out in a month and a half, then we'll be in and out in 3 months. And by the way, it won't cost anything. It'll be paid for by the oil revenues, and so on. And
So
then
Bush
3 months,
actually
and
said that?
6 months, and then 9 months, and then a year and 3 years. Pardon?
Bush actually said that they were going to pay for it with
Oh,
the
yeah,
oil.
he said very specifically, we're going to pay for it with the oil revenues. You know, what you say, our political memory is short, and you can kind of get away with those things. But so here's what happened. When 9/11 happened, all of a sudden, Cheney, the vice president, the people who started the new Project for New American Century think tank were, they all came from the Daddy Bush administration. It was
Here's a list of some of them.
Jeb-
Cheney, Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz,
Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Pearl, and Jeb
Abelson.
Bush was
Abelson.
on the deal. But they were the main ones there. But they were supposed to come up with this deal for the foreign policy. When Bush was elected, they took that 90-page one and they changed it to a 67-page book. And you can, I wrote to them because I wanted a copy of it. You could write and ask for the foreign policy for the George W. Bush administration. And all of these phrases, the exact same, they just shortened it to 67 pages and it looked like a light blue UN pamphlet that you could get, saying all these things. 9/11 happened, and Vice President Cheney was going around the White House saying we need to make the connection between 9/11 attacks and Iraq. Well, there wasn't a connection there, but you remember there was a battle that went on for a year and a half or so, saying, hey, they're trying to get the nuclear weapons, yellow cape uranium, which is not nuclear, it's just dirty bombs with spent uranium, and they've got weapons of mass destruction and so on, which apparently got sent across the border.
Hillary sold all that.
Oh, I think most of it was going along before Hillary, but at any rate, it got to the point where when we finally attacked Iraq, over half of the American people believed that Iraq this was somehow a reprisal for 9/11. When he was a bad guy. I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with Saddam. He was a little Hitler. He needs to, and his people should have overthrown him and put him to death or something. But he had nothing to do with 9/11. So by 2003, we went to war there. This is our national policy now. Barack Hussein Obama, who ran against this, said this is wrong and we need to get out of the Middle East and so on. He got in there and said, well, I guess we need to be there. In fact, we need to go step it up into Afghanistan. And if Hillary gets elected or Jeb gets elected or Rubio, or I'm so sad to say it, even Ted Cruz. I love Ted Cruz. I have a Ted Cruz sign in my yard. And yet he is surrounded by neocons. Neocon is a term that, neoconservative, new conservative, that's been used a bunch of different, it's used back in the 1930s for some people that weren't quite Republican, but it was used within the Republican Party. It was used again in the 1990s, neoconservatives. And then, who's the guy on Fox News that, I think he's paraplegic? Krauthammer. He said, these guys aren't neoconservatives, they're neocons. I like that, because neocons, they're like con men and they're convicts and so on. He used that pejorative term, neocons, and it stuck.
You know what Krauthammer's first job in politics was?
Who? Krauthammer?
He was a speechwriter from the government.
Son of a gun. Well, he used to be a good speechwriter.
Yeah.
Didn't help the government, apparently.
He woke up and became a conservative.
Yeah.
The one thing about it, at least if Cruz gets in there, he'll at least protect the homeland.
If what?
He'll protect the homeland.
Who will?
Cruz.
He will protect the homeland.
Yes.
But I'm suggesting to you, my deal is, we need to live by the law, the rule of law, not the rule of man. We are not living by the rule of law here, attacking other countries with offensive, undeclared, illegal, unconstitutional wars. That doesn't mean that all the soldiers, they're all heroes, obviously. Anybody goes over there and risks and gives up their life and limb, they are heroes. And of course the government has played on that. You remember those, how they had the
Peace sign, what is it?
thing that says support our troops? That was a brilliant move, because who doesn't support the troops? We all support the troops. It's whether or not we have should be, and why wouldn't we want to declare war? Why is it wrong? Why did the founding fathers say you got to have declared war? The Congress has to do it, by the way, not the president. But why do we have to declare a war? Why don't we just let the president go out and bomb the heck out of them like Trump says?
We're the sovereigns.
Bushes like they're doing.
Needs to be a consensus of the people.
If you're military, are you military?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you think it would make a difference if our country is united behind the, that we have a united, since then we've had, Vietnam veterans coming back. They were just returning heroes in World War II. And yet, coming back at least in Vietnam and from Desert Storm and whatever we call it, this last one here in 2003, and then the Afghanistan war, we don't have the country united there. And
Well, before kings determined, you're going to go to war, we're going to go over here and invade France or Germany or wherever. And the king just made a arbitrary decision to do that.
so we want the people to decide, is this worth risking the life and limbs and national blood and treasure to go to war and so on?
Also, I would say you need to express your legal reason for going to war. It's the same reason we put in our Declaration of Independence was it was to address the world that we are not just rebels that are going up against the rightful authority. We express that their authority does not exist. You need to say your
That's-
legal reasons. That's why you declare war.
Do military people talk about that? Because of course that's exactly right. With declared wars, they talked about it. They had why we were going to war. We know who the enemy is. We know what we're going to try to accomplish. All these wars are just managed, politically managed wars, and we could spend a lot of time talking about that.
Talk about all the things that already tried that didn't work. King George. They explained the things that they had already tried that the king ignored. So justification for, we don't have any choice now.
There's a lot of things that are solved just by obeying the Constitution and going through the process where you have the debate by our representatives in Congress, and so that the people are determining whether or not we ought to be going to war and who the enemy is, and that we have a goal and an exit strategy, and we don't just turn it over to. If we had the time, we talk about how Bush got through with this, and he never got a declared declaration of war. He got a couple of resolutions that don't have any legal power at all, where Congress basically said, well, use whatever power you think that you need to use. Yes.
I'd also kind of say further on that the concept of declaring war legally, that is very much part of Western society, even dating back to the Middle Ages, because though kings were in charge in the old times, they were not complete monarchs. Absolute monarchy is something that exists post the 1600s. Prior to that, if a king wanted to go to war, he had to convince his followers, his nobles, the knights, to follow him. Now, the average person didn't have a say, but each night, it was that concept of feudalism.
In the feudal system, we did have that, but even then, because they had the king's force and so on, the kings could do things that he didn't have to get Parliament's approval of doing it. If he could borrow money,
I was going to say not without Parliament, but the point being, before going to war, a king would declare it because you're going to risk either unifying other nations against you. Facing in the Middle Ages, they faced excommunication too, which could turn your people against you. That happened to King John. That's partially why he was such an unsuccessful king, is because he faced the censure not only of the nobles, but of the church, the people, and all the opinion of Europe. So traditionally, you had to declare why you were going to take this property to someone else. It was something that was based more in the Christianity of Europe rather than the ancient times where the king was God and could do whatever he wanted, like under Rome or previous nations.
there was more and more control. I mean, for 1,000 years, it was developing more and more that way. It's not like we just all of a sudden in America did it right. They were beginning to do things right, starting way back with Charlemagne, and possibly before that, there was more and more controls on the kings.
The Vikings.
But there still wasn't nearly enough control on the king, because the king was getting away with murder and wars and so on. And things changed here in America. The reason I wanted to bring this up is just to say that as far as this is our war policy. It is this Bush doctrine, what we call the Bush doctrine, is the Obama doctrine. It's the it's the Republican doctrine, and it's the Democratic doctrine as far as the parties are concerned. It was a lie. We were never going to get out of the Middle East. This is our new Germany. It's our filling station and our basis there, whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan. We're there for the duration, just like we've been in Germany for the duration of our lives, in North Korea, and we're there in the Middle East until they decide to have World War III.
But doesn't this look like an outgrowth of the very inception of the Cold War with Russia that started off right after World War II? And we started into this combative situation over Europe that we lost a good chunk of. And the Russians, I mean, they took us to task on a lot of things, especially on subterfuge and spying. And they started a lot of this kind of stuff of taking over other countries. We responded in kind of saying, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. We're going to fight back. But this looks like an outgrowth. The ultimate.
My answer to you is I don't know enough about it. I would like to say that I'm pro-America and so on, but all that I care about, the whole purpose of this deal, is to say we need to obey the law. We need to obey the Constitution. We will be better off if we obey the Constitution, and we're not obeying the Constitution with these undeclared offensive wars that we have now here to, again, not the rule of law here. We're allowing men, and they're not even Americans for the most part, to run our economy and to run the world because of the money.
Here's the scenario. What happens if ISIS comes in and starts a war with us? And Obama still won't recognize that. Can Congress then go ahead and declare war?
Congress can declare war anytime that they want. They
Without
could
him,
do so.
Without him.
Pardon me?
Without the president.
Yes, the president doesn't have any authority to declare war. The president is only the commander-in-chief. Once the lawmaking authority, Congress, has declared war and called upon him then, okay, now do your job as
Yeah,
commander-in-chief.
but everything else he's ever done, he doesn't do. So what makes you think that he's going to carry out the war?
Well, I don't know that he would if he didn't. I would guess that Obama, the way that has gone with Obama, I hope there's no Obama supporters here, but he has said, if I don't like a law, I'm not gonna carry it out. I don't care about the take care clause.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right, that if he disagreed with some declared war, whatever it would be.
Then where are we going to be?
Well,
then the states have
we
to
have a
take
constitution
it, right?
that says you impeach people that aren't obeying the law, and we have a take care clause that says not that he should, but that he shall take care that the laws that are passed by Congress are faithfully executed. We ought to be, I'm saying, we ought to be impeaching and convicting presidents who ignore the law, who won't carry out a law, or who try to become a law unto themselves and make a new law with an executive order to say that he can do that and then to take actions. We shouldn't be allowing them to get away with it. There's not any question that our elected representatives ought to be doing that. Whose fault is it? Well, it's partially our fault because we're letting those guys stay in. We need to be, now I'm not saying that you can force somebody out. Louis Gohmert, in my book, he's a great congressman, except he voted wrong on NDAA.
You said you were-
was wrong when he didn't vote when he voted wrong on that particular,
What do we do about it?
Well, what we do about it is we learn what's right and wrong. We learn the Constitution, we learn the rule of law, we demand that if you and I just kind of go along with the flow, I don't buy that for a split second, that we should vote for the lesser two, but you